Have you ever felt that your life is a maze you can't escape? You push forward with all your might, only to find yourself mysteriously back at the starting point, trapped by the same problems, the same mistakes, the same emotions. It's as if there's a traitor inside you, always whispering for you to give up just when you're closest to victory, always detonating your destructive anger over trivial matters. It makes you wear a mask of righteousness to despise those who chase fame and fortune, yet leaves you tormented by your own repressed desire for success, unable to sleep at night. Or it simply paralyzes you, nailing you in place with the fear of failure, allowing you to whitewash your inaction with procrastination and excuses. Stop deceiving yourself. None of this is bad luck. There's a force in your inner world that you've deliberately forgotten. A force secretly shaping your personality, distorting your choices, and deciding your fate. Carl Jung gave it a name, the shadow. It's the basement of your psyche, filled with everything you personally buried to be accepted by society. Your desires, your vulnerabilities, your shame, all your incorrect emotions. You thought that by locking them away, they would cease to exist. But the problem is, what you run from will eventually rule you. The shadow never disappears. The more you deny it, the darker and more powerful it becomes, gathering strength in the depths of your unconscious, biding its time. When it breaks through, that's when you inexplicably lose control. Push away those who love you, and then ask yourself why you're always alone. It's when you viciously criticize others, not realizing it's a projection of what you fear most in yourself. It's when you repeatedly sabotage your own life, only to sigh and tell yourself, "See, I knew I wasn't good enough." Jung was right. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. If you don't dare to face your shadow, it will become the puppet master of your destiny, while you naively believe everything is random. But if you have the courage to look within, the bravery to embrace what you've always avoided, you can transform this dark force into your greatest weapon. This is precisely what we will uncover today. Get ready. This journey won't be comfortable, but if you truly desire to break the chains of self-destruction and take control of your life, this is your only path. From the day you were born, the world has been teaching you how to behave. You quickly learned which emotions were good and should be displayed, and which were bad and must be hidden. You may have long forgotten the words, but they are carved into your very bones. Don't cry, don't be a weakling. Getting angry is wrong. You need to be considerate. Don't be so selfish, learn to share. And so parts of you were amputated, repressed. What happened to your primal anger, your pure sadness, your ambition to fight for yourself? Did those instincts that didn't fit the good child mold just disappear? No, they didn't. They were simply exiled to the dark corners of your unconscious, where they gathered to form what Jung called the shadow, an inner personality that holds all your rejected traits, desires, and impulses. This shadow is not some vague philosophical concept. It lives inside you, operating silently in the background of your mind. Every time you feel an inexplicable repulsion and discomfort in the face of an overly confident person, it might be because your own desire for expression and self-assurance was killed by your own hand. Every time you scathingly mock others' craving for recognition, it might be because you harbor the same desire to be seen, but have buried it under a tombstone of humility and selflessness. Every time jealousy gnaws at your heart like a venomous snake, it might be because you've repressed your own ambition, because someone once told you that wanting too much was arrogance, and so you walk through life like an iceberg. What people see is just the small tip above the water, the gentle, proper, socially acceptable you. But the vast majority of your true self, along with its immense energy, lies dormant in the dark, cold water below, invisible even to you. But ignoring the shadow doesn't keep it docile. On the contrary, the more you deny it, the more it seeps into your life in distorted and destructive ways. It manifests as irrational fears that keep you up at night, A sense of fate that makes you stumble in the same place repeatedly. A resentment you can't explain, and those toxic patterns that repeat like a curse. So the real question isn't whether you have a shadow. The question is, to what extent is it controlling your life without your knowledge? How does this hidden you manipulate you so precisely, leaving you trapped in a quagmire? Next, we will delve into the insidious and destructive methods your shadow uses without your awareness. When you recognize them, you will no longer be able to pretend it doesn't exist. Have you ever wondered why your life seems to be stuck on a loop? Why, even when you want to improve, you're always pulled back to square one by an invisible force? Why do anger, jealousy, or fear overwhelm you without warning? The answer is simple: because your shadow has never been asleep. It is the master of your life. And the most terrifying part is that all its actions are beyond your conscious awareness. The shadow never declares war openly. It doesn't shout or announce itself. It operates in secret, silently, like a ghost haunting your body, quietly distorting your emotions, manipulating your choices, and dictating your reactions. You think you're the captain of your ship, but in reality, you're being pushed along by a dark undercurrent you buried years ago. One of its most common tactics is projection. Think back. Is there someone you hate with a passion? Is there a certain behavior in others that provokes a disproportionate disgust in you? This is because we always see in others what we refuse to admit in ourselves. For example, a person taught to suppress their ambition will feel an irrational contempt for those who actively pursue success. A person who fears their own aggression will be intensely bothered by those who are direct and assertive. Instead of acknowledging these traits within themselves, they throw them onto others like garbage and then attack fiercely. Another destructive weapon of the shadow is self-sabotage. This happens when you unconsciously set up roadblocks to your own success. You procrastinate at crucial moments, you give up too easily, you repeatedly make wrong choices, all because a voice deep inside you is saying, you don't deserve success, or you're afraid of the unknown that change brings. This explains why countless people fail when they are just one step away from their goal. The shadow acts as an invisible jailer, preferring you to be comfortable in your familiar misery rather than allowing you to break free into happiness. It also permeates your relationships. Have you noticed how some people seem to be magnets for the same type of toxic partner? How some people always end up in draining friendships? This is no accident. We unconsciously project our traumas and seek out scenarios that perfectly replicate them. If your shadow is filled with experiences of rejection, you will be drawn to those destined to reject you. If you are riddled with deep-seated insecurity, you will become entangled with people who always make you doubt your own worth. Worst of all, the shadow can gradually consume your identity. You convince yourself, this is just who I am. You believe your behaviors and feelings are innate, but in reality, they are the result of layers of repressed experiences. You start to believe you're unlucky, naturally anxious, or not capable, when the truth is, you are simply living under the influence of this hidden part of yourself. Since the shadow's power is so immense, the question arises, how can we identify the signs that we are being controlled by it? How do we determine if it's us at the helm or the dark side of our psyche? In the next part, we will explore the clear, undeniable signs that your shadow is secretly manipulating your life. When you see them, you will no longer be able to deceive yourself. If your life feels like a locked playlist on repeat, if you constantly feel frustrated, anxious, or unable to change certain behaviors, then it's highly likely your shadow has quietly taken the driver's seat. But how can you be sure? How can you identify the signs that this hidden part of your psyche is manipulating your choices and silently eroding your life? The first clear evidence is constant projection. Have you noticed that certain people can easily ignite your anger? That some traits in others provoke a strong revulsion in you? This is the shadow at work, making you see in others what you cannot accept in yourself. A person who has suppressed their own need for attention may feel an inexplicable disdain for those who express themselves freely. A person who denies their own aggression may be excessively annoyed by those who are direct and assertive. The problem is, as long as you don't admit this irritation comes from within, you will forever search for scapegoats in the external world to blame for your internal conflicts. Another sign of the shadow's rule is persistent self-sabotage. Have you ever stood on the threshold of success, only to watch everything suddenly go wrong? As if some force was secretly ensuring your failure. This is because the shadow fears change. If at some point in your life you were taught that you don't deserve success, love, or happiness, this repressed belief will continue to run like a background program, finding subtle ways to ensure you never cross that invisible line. This is precisely why so many people give up, just as they are about to achieve a major breakthrough. The third symptom is a repeated pattern of toxic relationships. If you are always attracted to the same type of person, those who devalue you, ignore you, use you, this is no coincidence. Something within you is unconsciously seeking this familiar dynamic. If you were rejected as a child, you might spend your life seeking out people who will reject you again, to confirm your deeply held belief. If you were taught to suppress your anger, you might be drawn to people who constantly test your limits, because your shadow has found an indirect way to vent that repressed energy. Furthermore, a powerful sign is an irrational fear of judgment. Are you terrified of criticism? Do you avoid showing your true self as much as possible, for fear of looking foolish? If so, your shadow is likely filled with repressed shame. Perhaps at some point you learned that making mistakes was unforgivable, that being authentic meant risking rejection. The result? You live like a startled animal, constantly trying to please, constantly avoiding any chance of being seen as wrong. But this fear doesn't come from the present. It is a ghost from the past, an echo of all that has been denied and buried within you. Finally, one of the cruelest signs of the shadow is an inexplicable sense of emptiness. Have you ever felt that even when you have everything, something is still missing? As if there's an insatiable black hole in your soul. This is because, over the course of your life, you have amputated parts of yourself to be accepted. You repressed your true desires, your deepest ambitions, your authentic self. And now, even if you don't know what it is, you feel the weight of that absence. But if these signs resonate with you, it doesn't mean you're hopeless. On the contrary, recognizing the shadow is the first step to reclaiming your life. The real danger has never been having a shadow, for we all do. The real danger is continuing to live in ignorance of it. But now, a bigger question looms. What happens if you continue to ignore your shadow? What happens when it becomes so repressed that it erupts in unpredictable, destructive ways? Next, we will explore the cost of living in denial and why ignoring your shadow might be the biggest mistake of your life. The shadow you ignore does not simply vanish. It only accumulates, grows stronger, and waits patiently. The more you deny it, the more twisted ways it will find to manifest itself. If you don't take control, these manifestations will eventually become catastrophic. You can spend years pretending certain emotions and impulses don't exist, but there will come a day when everything repressed erupts like a volcano. At that point, you will have nowhere to hide and will have to face the consequences. The greatest danger of ignoring the shadow is that it always finds an escape route. If you repress your anger, it might erupt in an uncontrolled explosion at your most important moment, destroying your relationships and opportunities. If you hide your deepest desires, they may emerge in self-destructive forms, such as addiction, compulsion, or reckless indulgence. If you bury your traumas, they may manifest as unexplainable anxiety, panic attacks, or even physical symptoms that modern medicine is powerless to address. Don't delude yourself. The shadow's influence extends far beyond your inner world. It actively shapes your reality. If you don't acknowledge your fear of abandonment, you will likely cling desperately to any toxic relationship to avoid loneliness. If you deny your own ambition, you will constantly self-sabotage your career and convince yourself that success is not for you. If you hide your desires, you will become lost in a silent frustration, wondering why your life feels so dissatisfying. But the greatest danger of all is that if you do not integrate your shadow, it will eventually consume you entirely. Have you ever met someone who seems to be dominated by their own resentment? They are always blaming others, always carrying a silent rage, always in a state of defense and attack. These people were not born this way. They simply spent a lifetime repressing their pain until one day, their shadow grew so powerful that it took over, becoming the master of the house. The result is an endless hell of resentment, fear, and self-destruction. And perhaps worst of all is depersonalization, the feeling of being a stranger in your own body, completely disconnected from your true self. This happens because, in repressing the shadow, you also repress fundamental parts of yourself. You try to be only the light side, erasing all traces of darkness, not realizing you are amputating vital organs of your psyche. Over time, this leads to a persistent feeling of emptiness, as if you've lost something you can never remember. Then, the inevitable question arises, how do you escape this cycle? How do you stop being a puppet of your own shadow and start consciously integrating it? In the next section, you will discover the key to transforming your shadow from a hidden enemy into a powerful ally, and finally reclaiming control of your own life. Now that you understand the cost of ignoring your shadow, the most crucial question arises, how do you bring it into the light? How do you stop being manipulated by these hidden aspects of your psyche and start using them to your advantage? Integrating the shadow does not mean destroying or eliminating it. That's impossible. Jung teaches us that the shadow is never our enemy. On the contrary, it contains core parts of who we are, dormant forces that can become our greatest source of power if we learn how to harness them. The problem was never the shadow itself, but our denial of it. The first step to integrating it is to consciously identify it. This means paying close attention to your emotional triggers. When something or someone provokes a disproportionate reaction in you, stop and ask yourself, what does this reflect about me? Instead of blaming the other person, turn your gaze inward. If someone irritates you for being arrogant, are they simply expressing a confidence you've repressed? If you feel contempt for those who seek success, is there not a part of you that also desires it, but has been suffocated by limiting beliefs? The second step is to allow yourself to feel what has been denied. If you've spent your whole life pretending you never get angry, it's time to gaze at that feeling without fear. This doesn't mean you should go around yelling at people. It means sitting with yourself and admitting, yes, I feel anger. Yes, I feel envy. Yes, I am afraid. And that's okay. The shadow only controls you when you pretend it doesn't exist. When you face it head on, it loses its power over you. A powerful tool for this process is reflective writing. Take a notebook and start writing down your deepest thoughts without censorship. Ask yourself, what aspects of myself do I reject? What behaviors in others do I judge most harshly? What do I most fear others discovering about me? Writing about these things may be uncomfortable, but it is also liberating. Because by naming your shadow, you drag it from the darkness into the light of consciousness, and what is conscious can be controlled. Another vital method is visualization and internal dialogue. Jung suggested that we should talk to our shadow as if it were a separate person. It may sound strange, but it works. Close your eyes and imagine this repressed part of you. What does it look like? What does it want to tell you? Often, when we give our shadow a voice, we discover it's not a monster, but simply a forgotten part of ourselves whose only wish is to be heard. But integrating the shadow is not an instantaneous process. It's a continuous journey that requires courage and honesty. The most important thing is to understand that your darkness does not have to be your enemy. Repressed anger can be transformed into the power to act. Fear can be transformed into prudent wisdom, and desire can be transformed into creative passion. Everything you once denied can be repurposed as fuel for your growth. Now that you know how to begin integrating your shadow, a final question arises. Why is this so rare? Why do so few people have the courage to look within? In the final section, we will explore why most people choose to live in denial and illusion, and how you can become the exception, the one who truly awakens to who they really are. At this point, you know clearly that whether you like it or not, the shadow is within you. You can choose to continue denying its existence, pretending your fears, insecurities, and repressed impulses have nothing to do with your life. Or, you can make a decision that very few have the courage to make, to look within and reclaim sovereignty over your own psyche. But before you choose, there's something you must understand. The vast majority of people will never do this work. They will continue to repeat the same mistakes, live in the same cycles of self-sabotage, and blame the world for all their problems. They will remain stuck in the past, chewing on resentment, projecting their frustrations onto others, and convincing themselves that fate or society is responsible for their failures. They will never have the courage to face the truth about themselves. But you are different. If you've made it this far, if you've followed every step of this journey, it means a part of you knows that change is imperative. You are tired of being a prisoner of unconscious patterns, tired of being dominated by forces you don't understand. This means you are ready to take the step few dare to take, to integrate your shadow and become who you truly are. But don't be fooled. This path is by no means easy. To see your shadow means giving up the comfortable illusion that you already know everything about yourself. It means confronting past traumas, admitting unpleasant truths, and taking responsibility for the fact that much of what happens in your life is your own doing. This process can be extremely uncomfortable, but it is also the only real path to freedom. The question now is, what are you going to do with this information? Will you simply absorb it and go on with your life as if nothing happened? Or will you actually put it into practice? If something in this video resonated with you, tell me in the comments. What part of your shadow do you realize you've been ignoring? Have you noticed repetitive patterns in your life that can be explained by this? Share your experience, because talking about it is, in itself, the first step toward making it conscious. More importantly, don't stop here. The next video will take you even deeper into another critical piece of this puzzle. If you truly want to evolve, you cannot afford to ignore it. So keep watching, because this knowledge might be the missing key to completely transforming your life.